So, yeah, everybody, let's do our best to, if you'd like, you can close your eyes, to let go of everything and relax. Letting go of everything entails the past, just up until a minute ago, just not knowing anything that's happened before right now. And so we're just here now. And one way of being here now is to draw attention away from thinking and into body sensations. Just sensation, not emotion. Emotion is a step away from sensation. We've dropped the past completely. We're relaxing into the body, moving away from thinking into pure sensation. And rather than describing emotions, for instance, we're just feeling more deeply into the actual sensation. So an emotion might be sadness. Pure sensation could be my cheeks are wet. Just sensation. So when we bring our attention away from thinking and into the body, you might notice that it's quieter. There's more space. There's an openness without needing to know anything. There's no knowing. And the breath can be experienced as very pleasant, just a beautiful ebb and flow. There's an inhale, and that's life energy. And there's an exhale, and you're just unburdening yourself. And the attention can remain on the inhaling sensation and the exhaling sensation, and things further quiet down and deepen down. There's a flow, even a floatingness, none of which needs to be described in words or language. Just settling. Paradoxically, embodying the spiritual, embodying presence, which is spiritual now. Just being here now. There's a joy of being. There's an undeniable beingness, aliveness that we are. And everything right now is just fine. All is well. So you might find a little smile at the corners of your lips. Your forehead may smooth. Your toes may wiggle happily. I get a kind of inner sensation like champagne bubbles. Mm. Yeah. So you can come back gently at your own pace, or you can remain in this state if you like and just be here with us. Either way, it's all good. I like to print out the email that I send to focus me on what I think we're doing. And yesterday I sent out one with a picture of kicking the ego off the cliff. You see that? And the quote that I pulled from the Manual for Teachers in A Course in Miracles, at the back of the manual is the clarification of terms. And I pulled a quote that says, "Who chooses hell when it is recognized?" This goes under these questions that I've been mentioning, that Jesus keeps posing these questions to challenge our belief system and to motivate us to really look with Him. I love the clarity and the pithiness of who chooses hell when it is recognized. The way that the ego gets over on us is that we're unconscious and we're in a default mode so that we're just accepting ego beliefs and ego thinking without realizing that that's what we're doing. If we knew that we were choosing hell, we would think twice at the very least. We might have a big argument with Jesus about, no, this isn't hell. What you're talking about is hell. You're wrong, Jesus. I'm right. I'm digging my heels in. I've carved out a little niche for myself of safety. I'm staying in it. We could have that argument with him, and that would be better than not arguing with him. At least we're in relationship with him, and we start to experience unconditional love when we argue with Jesus because he's never going to get angry with us. We could curse him out, verbally abuse him, and he's untouched by that. And we'll have a great experience of, I cannot harm him. And the relief that comes with that is huge because part of our default is thinking that we're guilty of something. And it can be a very vague sense of sort of free floating anxiety where we don't realize that we're feeling guilty and we don't know what we're anxious about. And that's where A Course in Miracles psychology is so brilliant because it explains from this spiritual path's point of view that the way that the ego has hooked us is to tell us that we're guilty of something, and that something is separating from God. And even though that separation is a great achievement, and it's the very thing that the ego seduced us with, hey, you could play at being God, you could separate from God. Once we do it, the ego realizes that it no longer has a lure. It no longer has anything to seduce us with. And that's when it just starts making stuff up on the fly. And the ego's been doing that ever since. So it's just like, but there's a catch. And the catch is you're a sinner. Yep, that's it. You're a sinner. And God's going to get you. And that whole condemnation with no ability to recover from that. That's it. We're eternally condemned. And so if we start to throw all of that at Jesus and tell him how unsafe we are and how untrustworthy he is, or how much we love him, and he's going to keep showing us what you're describing as love is not love. The more that we do that, the more we start to trust him. Because as we're in relationship with Jesus in this way, we notice that he cannot be harmed by our words. He cannot be triggered. He doesn't get emotionally upset with us. He's endlessly patient and kind. He's got a great sense of humor. Sometimes he takes us by the shoulders and gives us a little shake. That's about the harshest that it gets. So, no matter what, A Course in Miracles is urging us to listen to what Jesus has to say. He's explaining that what we've taken to be reality is not reality. And identifying as a human in a physical body in a physical world is not reality either. So this is mind-blowing stuff. I quoted Muji last week. And I'll do it again now. I like when we get to a point like this, and Muji will look at the satsang community and say, have I gone too far? Have I gone too far? You're not a human. You're not in a body. You're not in a world. What you call thinking is not thinking. Jesus says the same thing throughout the course. If it reaches a point where the mind boggles and you just can't understand, that's no problem because Jesus is offering us a transmission. As long as we have a little willingness to receive the, the loving healing that he calls a miracle, as long as we're willing to be sponges and just soak it in and absorb without understanding how that happens, and another way of putting it is as long as we're willing to change the channel and go from WEGO over to WGOD, just so that we're tuned into a loving signal instead of a fear-based signal, then we don't have to know anything else. All we need is that little willingness and just trust that a healing is occurring just by hanging out together and being willing to show up. And whatever rhythm, whatever pacing is right for us. That's all. If we've come to a spiritual path like this, I'm pretty confident that we can trust that we've lived many, many, many lifetimes and we've died many, many, many deaths. And so anything of that nature that seems scary to us, we can start to contemplate, start to just allow. I've done this a lot already. I don't have to be so afraid of losing control, of being Amy, of being a person. I don't have to dread death. It's not what I think it is. Jesus says there is no death. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I'm going to trust that I've died 1,000 deaths. Dropped, took my clothes off, walked through a doorway, just like that. And I think when Rafi was coming to class, we spoke about how when you lose a loved one, that when they're with us physically and they're alive, we see them sometimes. Maybe we see them a lot. But even if we live with them, we don't see them 24/7. But when a person dies, they're available to us 24/7. They're alive in our heart and they're alive in our intuitive ability, our sixth sense to feel through the veils. Rick, do you want to say something?
Yes, just briefly. I don't know if anyone has seen the 60-minute interview with Martin Short, who has dealt with so much loss in his life, including his daughter committing suicide, I think just in March, possibly, or very recently. But when he lost his older brother years ago, he was devastated, and he had a dream the next night in which there was this beautiful surrounding. And his brother came walking up to him in the middle of this idyllic nature that he was in. And he said, I'm in the next room. I'll be waiting for you when you get here.
Thank you, Rick. Just hearing somebody tell a story like that, it's so immediate. It feels so personal. Even if we're talking about it, it hits me again and again. Yes, Deb.
I so funny how I'm put on the spot and everything goes empty. But this, when your lead as you were talking about the guilt and like this essential knowing that I can't harm Jesus and that I can't do anything really wrong. And I know the course well enough to know why that is. I'm sitting here thinking, but just this morning I got so angry and said that thing. Like I know how the ego captures that well, I am guilty. I'm, like I have done these horrendous things and the mind will expand even more and I will recognize that that's everywhere and in all of us. another one of those, it's a thought, but it's also a sensation of some sort. I'm not quite sure yet. You know, but as soon as you started talking about death, it was like I realized a while back that I have no resentment for those who've passed. I do feel them forever here. And
Mhm.
I had been angry at some of my family members. And once they were gone, that was not available to me.
Mm.
Anger is the only thing that can happen to me now that I indulge in. It has nothing to do with them, who they were, that love when they're gone. I mean, even, we study history, and of course, certain historical people will bring up this conversation, this concept about anger, but I don't feel anger towards them. Like I
Mm.
recognized on this path that the anger happens in this, which is how the ego will convince me I am the guilty one, and at the same time screaming, it's not my fault. It's just so subtle and so confusing, but at the same time, I love knowing all of us in this collective conscious and that there doesn't have to be anger at all. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be there at all, ever. When I
Mm.
truly love the spirit that I am and you are, and Jesus
Yeah.
is.
Deb, is it almost a feeling? I'm just relating to what you're saying and wondering, is it a feeling of like something's missing at first? Like there used to be anger there and you feel for it, but it's not there?
It's going away. I mean, yeah, it's been a while since I've been plagued, but I also had to stop and look at it and stop allowing it to steal what I think is me.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for saying that. We have to stop and look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
I'm not
relate.
saying it's not going to happen again, because it's always happened again. And that feeling of ego taking over and I'm in the pits again. Well, I can stop it a lot sooner than that I mean, I know it's not it's like you said, going to God mind and never leaving that.
Yes, it's not the me that stops it. It's the changing of mind that interrupts the
Yeah.
anger or the fear-based emotion. It just interrupts it. And then that emotion might need to play out, just like when you turn off a ceiling fan. You flick the switch and you turn the power off, but the fan may still twirl for a while. So anger can still be felt. The human embodiment that continues as we're awakening from the dream of being human, as we're reconnecting to being spirit, it's like we're not taking it as personally anymore. So when we find that we've been sucked into personal identity and an emotion that goes with it, and then it's like a little hypnosis, and then we break out of it and go, oh, that just happened. And it just plays itself out, and we can tolerate it, no problem.
The sensation's there without thought. It is never a problem.
Without a story around it, without the need to defend
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Well, I think what we're going to read today also will speak to that somewhat. So we read in chapter 11, God or the ego. And then we had a diversion. We've been looking at the problem and the answer. What is the problem? The Holy Spirit is the answer. The Holy Spirit is the answer to everything. There are no real ego questions. Ego questions are pseudo questions. They're really statements disguised as questions, and ego questions are meant to implicitly state that the ego and the world and physicality and bodies are real. And then the question will be something like, well, why did God, make us then? And within that question is the assumption that God made us, whereas Jesus says, God didn't make you. So that's not a question, So, and also, I love how Jesus uses the word propaganda. He says all ego questions, which are not true, sincere questions, are just propaganda for the ego. One way or another, they're just saying this world exists. Now, tell me why this, that, or the other. This morning, I felt guided to start with the introduction to the manual for teachers. And then if we have time or next week, we'll continue on to the ego, the miracle. All of this is to give us a clearer basis for changing our mind. A Course in Miracles is simple because it's simply showing us that we can change our mind from listening to the ego and taking direction from the ego, and we can change to the Holy Spirit and then accept direction from the Holy Spirit. The ego would tell us, oh, now we're a slave to the Holy Spirit and we won't have any personal autonomy and we won't get to make our own decisions. And it's not like that. It's like we've only been charging our phone with a very defective power cord. And so our phone is not getting a good charge. And we unplug it from the defective one and we plug it into God. And now we're in full power. And we're still playing out as an individual. So we change to being an expression of God while we're still dreaming and awakening from the dream. You could look at it like that, except that now you're really getting beautiful power. Now, it's not direct power because we just like we couldn't handle it. So we're in the reflection of God's love when we tune in to the Holy Spirit and restore communication with the communication link. We're in the reflection of God's love, which is what we can tolerate for now. Now, Ken Wapnick said that we're always channeling. He took the mystery out of channeling. He said, you know, all these people who, and Ken was a little cynical about it. All these people who claim to be channeling and they're hearing the Holy Spirit and they're channeling this and that. He would say, it's not a big deal to channel. You're always channeling. It's just that you don't realize you're channeling the ego. So we're going to read about that in the introduction to the Manual for Teachers, how we're always teaching. And we've been teaching ego values without realizing it. And we're learning what we're teaching. Whatever we teach is what we're teaching ourselves. We're always in a process of reinforcing what we're teaching. And if we're in a default mode of teaching a fear-based way of approaching life and a separate alienated way of being here, then that's what we reinforce in ourselves. And that plays back to what Deb was saying. If I'm teaching anger, I'm learning anger. And I'm learning attack, and I'm learning to be afraid of attack. And it's just a bottomless pit of fear. And if we change teachers, it's very refreshing. Everything opens up, and we have to get used to what that feeling is, because at first we might have a free-falling feeling, that there's not our usual, what do we hold on to? What do we grasp? What are our boundaries? Okay. I think I mentioned last week or the week before that these introductions in A Course in Miracles, they just blow me away. I often feel like, I'll skip the introduction. I'm just going to jump right into, the chapter. Don't do that. The introductions, they orient us, they focus us, and they're powerful, they're potent. Now, remember, readers, read nice and slowly, no pressure. If you stumble over a word, just know that God is giving you a kiss on both cheeks. He thinks you're so cute. You can reread anything. And yeah, just take your time. And listeners, don't even try to understand the words. Just lean back and just sink down and inward. Just let the light language, the love of A Course in Miracles, marinate in that. Just allow yourselves to be saturated in this beautiful golden light that is the real healing that we get from the Course. And then we'll come back and we'll look at the words together.
The role of teaching and learning is actually reversed in the thinking of the world. The reversal is characteristic. It seems as if the teacher and the learner are separated, the teacher giving something to the learner rather than to himself. Further, the act of teaching is regarded as a special activity in which one engages only a relatively small proportion of one's time. Of course, on the other hand, emphasizes that to teach is to learn, so that teacher and learner are the same. It also emphasizes that teaching is a constant process. It goes on every moment of the day and continues into sleeping thoughts as well.
To teach is to demonstrate. There are only two thought systems, and you demonstrate that you believe one or the other is true all the time. From your demonstration, others learn, and so do you. The question is not whether you will teach, for in that there is no choice. The purpose of the course might be said to provide you with a means of choosing what you want to teach on the basis of what you want to learn. You cannot give to someone else, but only to yourself. And this you learn through teaching. Teaching is but a call to witnesses to attest to what you believe. It is a method of conversion. This is not done by words alone. Any situation must be to you a chance to teach others what you are and what they are to you. No more than that, but also never less.
The curriculum you set up is therefore determined exclusively by what you think you are and what you believe the relationship of others is to you. In the formal teaching situation, these questions may be totally unrelated to what you think you are teaching. Yet it is impossible not to use the content of any situation on behalf of what you really teach and therefore really learn. To this, the verbal content of your teaching is quite irrelevant. It may coincide with it, or it may not. It is the teaching underlying what you say that teaches you. Teaching but reinforces what you believe about yourself. Its fundamental purpose is to determine self-doubt. To diminish self-doubt. This does not mean that the self you are trying to protect is real, but it does mean that the self you think is real is what you teach.
This is inevitable. There is no escape from it. How could it be otherwise? Everyone who follows the world's curriculum, and everyone here does follow it until he changes his mind, teaches solely to convince himself that he is what he is not. Herein is the purpose of the world. What else, then, would its curriculum be? Into this hopeless, enclosed learning situation, which teaches nothing but despair and death, God sends his teachers. And as they teach his lessons of joy and hope, their learning finally becomes complete.
Except for God's teachers, there would be little hope of salvation, for the world of sin would seem forever real. The self-deceiving must deceive, for they must teach deception. And what else is hell? This is a manual for the teachers of God. They are not perfect, or they would not be here. Yet it is their mission to become perfect here, and so they teach perfection over and over in many, many ways until they have learned it. And then they are seen no more. although their thoughts remain a source of strength and truth forever. Who are they? How are they chosen? What do they do? How can they work out their own salvation and the salvation of the world? This manual attempts to answer those questions.
Thank you, readers. Beautiful reading. It's pretty intriguing, isn't it? This introduction? Yeah, and there are parts that might get confusing, so we want to be clear. And by the way, after all of those Jesus questions that he asks right there, the next section, which is called Who Are God's Teachers, begins with a teacher of God is anyone who chooses to be one. You don't need any special qualifications. A teacher of God is anyone who chooses to be one. And it just means that we're no longer interested in unconsciously defaulting to being a teacher of fear, to being a teacher of separation, to being a teacher of greed and self-preservation. We're no longer interested in coming from those thoughts, from the ego thought system. And so if we've lost interest in living unconsciously, being driven by sin, guilt, and fear, then we choose to be a teacher of God. And it's the third step of the forgiveness practice. You could summarize the forgiveness practice in 3 steps. The first step is we start to really pay attention to what Jesus is explaining to us in A Course in Miracles about what is not reality. And sometimes he tells us as closely as he can what reality is. So just to make that simple, Jesus is telling us we've gotten everything backwards and upside down and reversed. And so we're living in darkness, but we think we're living in light. And we're actually living in a death-based system because everything dies here, but we think that this is real life. Those are 2 examples of how Jesus is setting us straight. And as we're willing to trust Jesus, we start to acknowledge to ourselves, maybe Jesus is right about what he's saying. Maybe God did not make this world. And so God is not responsible for bad things happening to good people. Maybe what I take to be happiness is not really true happiness because Jesus says it would be constant and unchanging. And my happiness comes and goes. And so we start to pay attention and soak in and assimilate what Jesus is telling us. And the first step of forgiveness, I often just boil it down to acknowledgement. We're acknowledging what Jesus is teaching us here. And the second step of forgiveness is a little willingness, and we were talking about willingness not that long ago. It's a little willingness to accept the acknowledgement, to accept what we've been acknowledging as true, not entirely, just as much as we can, a little willingness. And with that willingness, we turn away from the ego, which is automatically turning us towards the Holy Spirit. I don't say we turn to the Holy Spirit because if we just do that without doing what Jesus tells us, and what Deb mentioned earlier, which is looking at the ego with Jesus. We need to look at that thought system to become aware, to gain consciousness of what we devised. We devised the ego thought system. So we can't just disown it and just go, okay, Holy Spirit, save me. The secret to salvation is that we have made up the whole false reality as we experience it. And we need to withdraw our projections and unwind our beliefs ourselves with the very powerful support of our mighty companions, the Holy Spirit and Jesus. That's how that is done. So step 1 is listening to Jesus, taking in what he's saying, starting to apply it to our own beliefs, starting to look with Jesus, and then really having a little willingness to change our mind, to exchange everything we've taken for granted as real and true, and open to having a new vision of what is actually real and true, which will be a reflection of God's love through the Holy Spirit. And then step 3 is to remain open and present to receive the miracle. We have to remain with the Holy Spirit. We have to tolerate the love of the Holy Spirit, which the ego has trained us. It has brainwashed us into thinking is a threat. So when that light behind Jesus starts to come our way, we often flinch. It's frightening to us. And we're getting enough mind training from Jesus that we can catch ourselves in the flinch and go, I'm going to breathe through this. Oh, this is actually good. Oh, this is good. This feels good. Good. Those are the 3 steps to forgiveness. You can read about them in workbook lesson 23, and you'll start to see them all throughout the course. You'll start to, as you're reading the course, go, wait a minute, I think those were the 3 steps. And I'm always numbering them throughout the text. Here it is, 1, 2, 3. You could use different words, but that's the basic idea. So the 3rd step is what Jesus tells us we need do nothing except not to interfere, not to let fear enter into our connection with the Holy Spirit. We have to remain open and allow the Holy Spirit to flow through us. That is the mind healing, and that is the miracle. And then the miracle radiates from us. And it reaches thousands of people beyond anything we'll ever really be able to understand. And that was also my kitten story. And if you want to read the kitten story, you can just go to amytorresacim.com. And I think it's the first thing on my blog. I think I pinned it. So having said all of that, let's read the introduction together. It's the introduction to the manual for teachers. Anybody who would like to be a teacher of God can be one. It simply means I no longer want to unconsciously default to the ego as my guide and teacher in my life. I'm taking back my life. I'm going to do something different with it. The role of teaching and learning is actually reversed in the thinking of the world. Everything here is reversed. Jesus has been telling us that all throughout the text. The reversal is characteristic. It seems, Jesus uses the word seems a lot. It's important to notice that. It seems as if the teacher and the learner are separated, the teacher giving something to the learner rather than to himself. Right? I mean, we've gone to school. We think that the teacher in the front of the classroom knows more than we do about a particular subject, and that teacher is giving us information, and the teacher is superior to us in that way, and that they're an expert. And the teacher thinks that too. And Jesus says, you got it all wrong. This, by the way, goes for psychotherapists as well. So traditionally, psychotherapists are trained in mental illness, and they learn a bunch of symptoms and the diagnoses, and they come in traditionally, this is a long time ago now. It's a lot better now. There's relational psychotherapy and humanistic psychotherapy. But starting with Freud, it was that the psychotherapist is well and the patient is sick, and work together and see, if you can heal. So there was a divide. And then that, I think, I don't know how bad it was with Freud. I'm not saying it was. Freud clearly had his own fallibilities. He was, I think, a chain cigar smoker who got jaw cancer or something and suffered terribly from a very visible addiction that he had. So he wasn't able to hide that. But, when you get into mental institutions and things like that, there can be a real abuse of power there. And it goes for anybody in a role of power, whether it's a minister, a politician, a teacher of any kind. Further, the act of teaching is regarded as a special activity in which one engages only a relatively small proportion of one's time. So, there's the idea like, this is my job. I teach chemistry. I do it during working hours, and then I go home and I have my life. But Jesus is saying, no, that's not how teaching works. Teaching is going on 24/7. And you haven't even known it. The Course, on the other hand, emphasizes that to teach is to learn. And I like how you emphasize that is, Beata. It was very satisfying for me. That italic. To teach is to learn. So we haven't really thought about that. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. But I was the teacher in that situation. They were learning. They were the learners, which totally upholds and reinforces separation. I'm the teacher, you're the learner. But Jesus is saying, first of all, I'm teaching all the time and I'm learning what I'm teaching. So I'd better pay attention to what I'm teaching, because it's not just the words, it's the embodiment, it's the attitude, it's the actions. The words are the least of it. The Course, on the other hand, emphasizes that to teach is to learn, so that teacher and learner are the same. He doesn't really mean I'm the same as you. He means I'm the teacher and the learner, and you're your teacher and learner. This Course also emphasizes that teaching is a constant process. Teaching goes on every moment of the day and continues into sleeping thoughts as well. Well, that's super powerful, and particularly for me, because I don't feel like I wrote it. I was given a book called Sweet Dreams of Awakening. And that book corresponds to every workbook lesson, and it kind of distills each workbook lesson down into a few kind of lines of poetry. And it was meant to prime the mind for retaining the Course in Miracles teaching while we sleep. That was the point of that book, that there should be no effort in it whatsoever, except for us to allow blessings to be laid upon us. So it can be used independently of doing the workbook, but it also corresponds to the workbook. And so if you wanted to top off your day with your workbook lesson, you could take Sweet Dreams of Awakening, and just in reading that lesson, the distillation of the actual day's lesson, allow blessings to be laid upon the mind and fall asleep with that. It's like putting food in the fridge overnight, marinating in a sauce, marinating in Jesus's recipe of love, life, and light. Yeah. That book surprised me, because that wasn't the book that I was expecting to write. And I never have written the book that I'm expecting to write. Maybe it will come through at some point. Okay, paragraph 2. To teach is to demonstrate. What is teaching? It's demonstration. There are only two thought systems, fear and love. And that you demonstrate, that you believe one or the other, is true all the time. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we are either demonstrating love or fear. And as we get really honest with ourselves, we'll start to notice that things that we've called love are not really love. And maybe things that we've thought are irresponsible have actually been guidance, because they're daring or seem risky in some way. From your demonstration, others learn, and so do you. So, for instance, if I get into a fender bender, a minor car accident, and it's the other guy's fault, and he's on the defensive, and he jumps out of his car and he runs up to me and he blames me to protect himself. You shouldn't have, whatever. And if I'm in a loving frame of mind, I don't defend myself, and I simply say something like, are you okay? Is everybody in your car okay? Psh. That's demonstration. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to get worked up. I have some level of understanding. This guy's afraid. He doesn't want his insurance to go up. Whatever. He's afraid right now. And I've been practicing the Course, and at the moment, I'm loving right now, so I'll be his miracle worker. Maybe he doesn't get it. Maybe he's even more suspicious of me because I'm being nice. Some people are like that. What are you being so nice to me for? You're very untrustworthy. I mean, that's life. That's humans for you. Again, as we continue to just align with the Holy Spirit, the next best thing will pop out of our mouth. So you may be able to think of a situation, any old situation where you notice like, wow, I I was kind and loving in this situation. I was not triggered. I didn't get defensive. That is a demonstration. That's an example of you aligning with love. And that's why we're practicing the course, really, just to have that mind training, undo the ego brainwashing, and then more and more live from this undefended place. In my defenselessness, my safety lies, is one of the workbook lessons. And another one is my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. From your demonstration, others learn, and so do you. So if we demonstrate fear and anger, that's what others are going to learn from us, and we're going to reinforce that in ourselves. But if we demonstrate love and patience and kindness, well, that's going to trickle down to others, and we're going to reinforce love in ourselves because it's going to feel right. And we're just going to know it's right. The question is not whether you will teach, for in that there is no choice. Again, we're teaching 24/7. It's just that we may be unconsciously defaulting to ego reasoning and teaching fear. And as we gain awareness of that, step one of forgiveness, getting more and more aware and acknowledging, oh, yeah, that wasn't really loving what I did. That was really self-protective. Then we open up our options to tune into the God channel, to tune into the Holy Spirit. And, that is not to say that in certain situations, we should not be self-protective. Sometimes it's loving to be self-protective. And we can discern that for ourselves. So if I'm walking around in my neighborhood and a big bear comes rumbling out of the woods and it's a mama bear and she's protecting her cubs, I'm not going to stand there and go, hey, how you doing? Somebody would have to be a lot more spiritually mature than me to totally trust that love container, for the mama bear to just be like, you're cool and back off. And I'm sure it could work like that, but I'm not there yet. So in that case, you make a big loud noise and you slowly back away. That's what I've learned. I was talking to somebody the other day and she said she in the mountains walks around with a can of bear spray. Not that she really wants to hurt a bear, but just in case. The purpose of the course might be said to provide you with a means of choosing what you want to teach on the basis of what you want to learn. I want to learn love, so I choose to teach love. How do I do that? By tuning into the love channel. I want to teach unity, so I choose to learn unity. But how? By turning into the unity channel. It's the same channel. It's the answer with a capital A that we've been talking about, the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is your inner teacher. It's the memory of God within us that has never gone anywhere. It's the present memory, which is always available to us. But we have to tune into it. We have to ask. We have to request to recognize what we already are. Chapter 3. The only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, the request to recognize what we already are and what we already have, and having and being are the same. You cannot give to someone else, but only to yourself. And this you learn through teaching. We can't force anything on anybody else. Jesus can't force awakening on us. Everybody has to choose for themselves, but we can learn what we're teaching. I want to learn joy. So I'm going to tune into the joy channel. It's all the same thing. It's just different ways of speaking about what is beyond our comprehension, which is the unified, loving, joyful beauty of God mind, the light filled, unending life, life unborn, undying God mind, which is our home with a capital H. Teaching is but a call to witnesses to attest to what you believe. It is a method of conversion. I'm just looking at a note I wrote in the margin. I just wrote that it is a method of conversion, that we're changing to a different belief system, a different thought system. That's what the conversion is, from fear to love, from darkness to light, from death to life. This is not done by words alone. Any situation must be to you a chance to teach others what you are and what they are to you. No more than that, but also never less. So teaching is but a call to witnesses to attest to what you believe. But the way that we call to the witness and the way they attest to what we believe is that we choose to see the light within them, no matter what their behavior, no matter what their words. And in doing so, we see the light in ourselves and vice versa. As a teacher, I'm a learner, learning to see the light in myself, and then I cannot but see the light in you. It's automatic. Once I'm tuned into the light channel, everything is perceived with this light. And so everything is met with love, because anything that's other than love is recognized as a call for love. And that doesn't mean that we're overly permissive with people, or that we condone bad behavior, or that we don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean any of that. In fact, we'll have a clearer sense of how to handle difficult situations and people. But we'll do it the whole time knowing that's a role they're playing, that's a costume they're wearing. That's not what they really are. And that's tremendous. That just dissolves the fight in us. There's no need to fight. And everything can be felt, because as our own character in the dream, until we fully awaken and we're not here anymore, we are going to be feeling feelings on the human level, just like we're going to be seeing colors, and we're going to feel the whole range of feelings at times. It's a rare one who just stops, as Deb was saying, just completely stops feeling angry. It's more that anger can come through and it's seen as a sensation, as a thought, that it has a story, there's an association, and it's allowed to just pass through. If we act out on it, then we forgive ourselves for it. If we need to make amends to somebody, we make amends. And everything is very close to when it's happening. There aren't these long grudges and gaps in, I haven't spoken to that person for 30 years. Everything's being processed as we go, because we're aware now. We're not unconscious anymore. You could say the course is a consciousness raising course. It's taking us from being completely unconscious and blind to ourselves to having more and more understanding of how we work, with less and less judgment, because as we look and let the shame come up and just the mortification of, I can't believe I did that, and let that all come up and through, we begin to see everybody feels like this sometimes, because this is just part of how the ego functions. That's why Jesus wants us to look at how the ego operates. Just looking helps us depersonalize ourselves in a healthy way and regard ourselves more as a vehicle, more as an antenna. The curriculum you set up is therefore determined exclusively by what you think you are and what you believe the relationship of others is to you. So if I think I'm Amy in a body and I think you all are separate people in other bodies, then that's how I'm teaching. And I'm reinforcing that all the time. But if we meet here together and have this image of Jesus with the light behind him, just reminding us throughout the whole class, whether we're looking at him or not, just this ongoing commitment, devotion to be lit from within, to know ourselves as the one, the memory of God within that understands the light language of Jesus, even as the personal brain objects to that or just kind of zones out, whatever happens there. Then let me look at the sentence again. The curriculum you set up is therefore determined exclusively by what you think you are. It depends what we think we are. If we're allowing ourselves to remember that we're that inner spark that actually brightens into this brilliant light that unifies all of us and changes how we identify, then that's how we see things. But for the most part, we're catching ourselves reinforcing separation so that we can stop doing that. This is a practice of catching ourselves reinforcing separation and then not doing that. And that's raising our consciousness. In the formal teaching situation, these questions may be totally unrelated to what you think you are teaching. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. All that matters is whether we're coming from love or fear. It doesn't matter if we're serving in the military or if we're a gangster. It doesn't matter if we're in prison. It just matters, am I teaching from love or fear? Am I learning love or fear? That's all that matters, not the subject matter. That's why, when people are really struggling and suffering with, I want a better job, I want to express myself in my work, it doesn't really matter when we change channels and value ourselves as this light. It doesn't matter what we're doing. I love that woman, Peace Pilgrim, who just felt moved to have no possessions and just trust God and just walk across the country. And, all she wanted to teach was peace and learn peace. And then people started to follow her, and people invited her into their homes and gave her a bed to sleep at night, and people gave her food. And Peace Pilgrim, I am so inspired by her. That leap of faith, that incredible trust, it just appeals to me so much. I'm just laughing at myself now because I'm like a little monk, who has a very solitary existence for the most part and almost shaved my head, but not totally, but meanwhile, I like to wear nice clothes and I want my, good glasses. But Peace Pilgrim, she was totally aligned, I've still got some real duality going on. Okay. Yet it is impossible not to use the content of any situation on behalf of what you really teach and therefore really learn. I think he means the content is either fear or love, that deeper content, no matter what the subject matter is. To this, the verbal content of your teaching is quite irrelevant, the subject matter, what we're saying. The words don't matter. It's where are we coming from? Are we coming from love or hate? And this hate or this fear, it's always self-hatred. Guilt is the same as self-hatred. And for us to start to face self-hatred, some of us are painfully aware of it. Even those of us who don't realize the unconscious depths of this guilt and self-hatred. And all of this is going to start to be churned up in order to be released. The verbal content of your teaching may coincide with the deeper content, or it may not. You might be teaching a course about fear or communication, and it's more aligned with the verbal teaching, but you might be teaching a course on how to cook. And people who cook with love, the food is definitely more digestible. Teaching but reinforces what you believe about yourself. Okay, he's just driving the point home. Its fundamental purpose is to diminish self-doubt. The ego's first question we learned a while back is, what are you? And it's an undermining, self-doubting question. What are you? That's not how we ask that question. The ego's fundamental purpose is to diminish. No. It would be the Holy Spirit's fundamental purpose is to diminish, to lessen our self-doubt that the ego has instilled in us, this self-doubt. This does not mean that the self you are trying to protect is real, but it does mean that the self you think is real is what you teach. So we are continuously teaching that I am a person and you are a person, and we take that to be real. Jesus is teaching us to align with love, which will diminish our self-doubt, even though the one that we think we are isn't even real. But we don't have to deal with that yet because we can't. We have to just work where we're at. The self that you think is real is what you teach. So now, if we start to think that the real self is that light within Jesus and the light that is behind and envelops Jesus, that this is what we really are, as we start to allow that possibility and then embrace that possibility and then experience the light more and more, then that is what we are teaching, because that is what we want to learn. And as we learn it, we know it more, and then we can't help but teach it because it's our presence. It's a demonstration. It's our attitude that just goes everywhere with us. Just a beautiful, lighthearted, bright, true, integrous love. So he says that it's inevitable that the self you think are real is what we're going to teach, and there's no escape from it. How could it be otherwise? Everyone who follows the world's curriculum, and everyone here does follow it until we change our mind, teaches solely to convince ourselves that we are what we aren't. We're teaching ourselves that we're a person, but we're not a person. And that's taking all of our energy. And that's why most people are so beat down and worn out and discouraged and despairing and find themselves in terrible, terrible conflicts. Herein is the purpose of the world, the ego world. What else then would its curriculum be except to uphold that separation? Into this hopeless and closed learning situation, which teaches nothing but despair and death, God sends his teachers. Well, that could be us starting right now. And maybe you've started long before right now. God sends his teachers. And all that means is that we want to show up as that light in the Jesus square. And when we fail in our mission, that we quickly forgive ourselves, because judgment is not going to help anything, and we just start again. That's all. And we trust that there's an incremental building of our ability to tune into that light. Except for God's teachers, there would be little hope of salvation. For the world of sin, and sin means separation in the Course, would seem forever real. The self-deceiving must deceive, for they must teach deception, and we must become aware that we've been teaching deception to ourselves and then to what seem to be others, but everybody else is just a projection of ourselves, to prove to ourselves that we're more than one. And in that proof, quote unquote proof, that we've separated from God. That's the ego mission. And what else is hell? The self-deceiving must deceive, for they must teach deception. And what else is hell? This is a manual for teachers of God, of light, of love, of life, real life. Teachers of God are not perfect, or we would not be here. We're forgiven. We're not perfect. Yet it is our mission to become perfect here. And so teach perfection over and over in many, many ways until we have learned it. Now, I would capitalize the P in perfect and perfection here so that we don't get mixed up and think of it as perfectionism. The ego teaches perfectionism and judges us and criticizes us and never allows us to really get anything perfect. And if it is perfect, it's just perfect for a little while and then it falls apart or it's ruined by something. But Jesus is talking about perfect with a capital P. It's just another way of saying God. So the teachers of God are not perfect, or we would not be here. But our mission is actually to become perfect here, to become godlike here, to become selfless and non-personal and radiant. And so we teach perfection with a capital P. We demonstrate that inner radiance over and over in many, many ways until we have learned it, because we're teaching what we want to learn, and we're having endless opportunities, especially in our special relationships. And all our relationships are special, even if they're short-lived, to practice. And special relationships are not always with people. Sometimes they're whatever our addictions are. And then, once we have learned perfection, we are seen no more. Although our thoughts, our loving thoughts, remain a source of strength and truth forever. And so we get a taste of that when people pass away. That's our first taste. They're here. They're here. So who are the teachers of God? Anyone who wants to be one. It's just a choice to practice what Jesus is offering us in A Course in Miracles. When Helen would complain to him and say, your course doesn't work, he would say, but honestly, have you practiced the course? I mean, yes, you're channeling the course, but are you practicing the course? And she kind of took the bickering that she did with Bill Thetford and she turned it over to Jesus. Said, now I'm going to bicker with you. So she fulfilled her mission in her way, and she didn't want to be judged for any ways that she did not care to do any more than what she was doing as the scribe with Bill. Who are they? Anyone who chooses to be. How are teachers of God chosen? We choose ourselves. It's not like there's a chosen people. We choose ourselves when we're ready. What do? We tune into the Holy Spirit, the memory of God within us. How can we work out our own salvation and the salvation of the world? We learn the secret of salvation, that we have actually been doing this to ourselves. We came up with the story of humankind and galaxies and universes, and just the story of being able to separate from a God mind, which is wholeness itself and therefore inseparable. And then we work out our salvation by withdrawing the projection, by going back the way we came. I think Ramana Maharshi said, retrace your steps, go back the way you came. And so now, as we look with the Holy Spirit, honestly, at lots of specific examples and feelings in our own lives, and then start to disidentify as thoroughly as the person, and then start to take other people less personally. And little by little, we're climbing that ladder back to heaven. We become what the Course calls happy learners. And then our life here becomes a happy dream, not because our circumstances change, but because we're living from the light. And then ultimately we reach the real world, which is right at the gates of heaven. And God lifts us up from there. That's the mythology. That's the way Jesus offers us a story in A Course in Miracles that we can relate to. So it's either that ladder up to heaven, or it's sinking down and inward and looking into the unconscious. What if we looked within and saw there was no sin? We can go the other direction. We could go down. So then he just says this manual attempts to answer these questions. And we don't have time now to start the next section, but at the end of the manual, there's the clarification of terms. And it was added after the course was first published. When they decided where to put it, they thought, well, let's put it all the way at the back. So, see, the last section in the manual is what is the resurrection? And as for the rest, it has 29 sections. And then you hit the clarification of terms. It also has an introduction. I don't know if we'll read that. We'll see. The first section in the clarification is mind, spirit. I think we'll start with section 2, the ego, the miracle, and continue to clarify what is this teaching learning thing that we're doing? How do we discern between the voice of the ego, which has mostly been unconscious, and the voice of the Holy Spirit, which we want to clearly recognize more and more now, so that we don't get fooled by the ego as it tries to take over our spiritual practice and do spiritual bypass. It can be done, though. So I have a song, and it's a long song. It's like 7 minutes. It's instrumental. It's by a group from, I think, the 70s called Weather Report, and the song is Birdland. It's an instrumental piece. It was huge at the time. I remember that when I first heard it, it had that spiraling upward thing that I've talked to you about, how music can do that. And it just blew me away. It just lifted me up. Interestingly, a couple of years after that, a great vocal group, Manhattan Transfer, sang the song. Now, the song was written as an instrumental, and then a great musician, I think his name is John Hendricks, put words to the song, but he did something that's called vocalese. And maybe he made up vocalese, but yeah, and Rick, you're nodding your head. My understanding of vocalese is that you're kind of singing along with the instruments. So when people sing this song, you can leave some of the instruments out because kind of like scat singing, if you're vocalizing, you're also vocalizing the instruments themselves. I'm not going to play the Manhattan Transfer version right now. I'm just going to play you the original instrumental. And these musicians blow me away because they're so dysfunctional, they're addicts, they're exhausted, their hair is dirty, they look like crap, And, and they have all these groupies. I'm like, why do you like this guy? He should take a bath. But they're so talented and their bodies, being a musician is so physical. And I'm always asking you to come into the body. So when you see these guys sweating and playing and they're so in the moment with their music, that's also what I'm hoping, that we'll have an experience of that, a vicarious experience. Isn't that inspired? See, he couldn't stop himself from singing. Jaco Pastorius was a bass player, an amazing bass player. He had to vocalize. Yeah, they were so in it. That's joy. That's vibration. We have singers here. I'm not a musician. I just so appreciate. Okay, darlings. We'll be here next Wednesday. Okay, see you next time. Mwah.